I'm Marty Abbott, President of Incentives Management Group. For 25 years, the IM Group has been helping corporations reduce costs and increase investment ROI by obtaining state incentives. To enhance our understanding of business segments that relate to ours, we started an experts interview series. In it, we talk with thought leadership in business areas that impact our business. My guest today is Dave Modi. Dave has recently retired from his latest VP of Government Affairs role with Dover Corporation. Dave and I met about 20 years ago. Dover is a diversified manufacturer with 5 major operating segments, annual revenue of over $7 billion, and worldwide employment of 24,000 people. Let's get to the interview with Dave. Dave, great to have you here today, and appreciate your sharing your time with us. Why don't we start out by talking about the early part of your career, maybe when you were in college and you were deciding to go into a career. Why government affairs? Where did you start out?
Well, I'm a lawyer, and I actually started out my career in-house for a company in their legal department.
Okay.
And then after 2 assignments internally in the legal department, I got transferred to the Washington office, which at that time was just another division of the legal department.
Got it.
And the idea was I would be in Washington anywhere from 3 to 5 years, and then I would go back to headquarters and be a lawyer again. Well, while I was in the Washington office, they did a reorganization and they moved government affairs out of the legal department into a separate, newly created department. And my boss, who was also a lawyer, kind of talked me into staying. He said he could do better for me in my career in staying in Washington as government affairs than I would be going back and getting buried in the legal department. So I, by default, became a lobbyist. I'm one of the few in my position that never spent a day. The only time I worked for the government was when I was in high school. I was a lifeguard at a state park.
Yeah.
So I never worked for any government before that. And that's unusual. Most people who've been around as long as I have spent time working on the Hill for one or more members of Congress, and
Right.
Often in the administration in some capacity. And I never did.
And you never look back? No regrets, huh?
Well, you always wonder if the grass would have been greener on the other side. And, when you get frustrated with government affairs and you think about, what you might have done as a lawyer. But, I'm sure if I were a lawyer, I'd say I should have stuck with government affairs. The grass would have been greener on this side of the fence.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you realize the grass is just as brown on the other side as it is here sometimes.
What was your first assignment, and where did you go from there? Have you had mostly large corporations as?
Yeah, all large corporations.
Okay.
The first company was DuPont, and that's where I started in its legal department in Wilmington, Delaware.
Okay.
And from there, I went to Georgia Pacific, and that's where I was promoted to vice president. And from there to American Standard, where we met.
Yep.
And then American Standard went through a corporate shakeup in 2008, where it sold a division, spun off a division, and then the parent company, what was left over, called itself Trane. Trane was then acquired by Ingersoll Rand. So I was with Trane for about 6 to 8 months, no, a little more than that, but several months before the acquisition announcement was made. And then, so probably about a year with Trane, most of that done under the cloud, if you want to call it that, of the acquisition hanging over us.
Yeah.
And then from there to Dover. And Dover's where I ended.
Was the focus, given the corporations that you worked for, was the focus of most of your work federal or state, or?
At first it was all federal, at DuPont and at Georgia Pacific. When I got to American Standard, it became global, and it was global for the rest of my career.
Okay. And American Standard and Dover and so forth, there was a considerable amount of international work, or?
Quite a bit, especially at American Standard. At Dover, I really wasn't there long enough. My boss and I had talked about starting to get out. I'd been there about a year and a half when I left. and to get out overseas and start to find out what was needed in the other businesses overseas. They were all global companies. Ingersoll ran a little bit less so, just because we had people on the ground. I traveled to Europe several times at Ingersoll Rand, but never to China. And I went to China a fair amount with American Standard.
Yeah.
China and Asia generally.
Yeah. So there's probably been, over the course of your career, a considerable amount of changes in Washington, in government affairs and so forth, or maybe not. I mean, describe to me sort of the state of government affairs today versus what it was when you started out, what you anticipated it to be.
Well, when I started, it was a pre-internet age, and I was a lot younger. And then you could take staffers to lunch, and I know it's viewed as you're buying influence, but really it was just a way to get to know somebody that you're working with, get to know them on a personal level. And I was young, most staffers are young, so some of them became friends that we would socialize outside of work, had nothing to do with work, and many of them left. When they left government, we stayed friends, and we still, some I still keep in touch with years, 30 years later. So that's one big difference. And again, I don't know whether that was because now you can't do that. And I don't know whether it's less fun now because I'm older or because I can't do that, or both. Certainly, I think what you see in the press, it's become a lot more partisan.
Right.
You used to have a lot of conservative Democrats, a lot of liberal Republicans. And when these think tank type organizations would do analyses of the most conservative, most liberal members of Congress, there was always overlap between Republicans and Democrats. I haven't seen one of those surveys lately, but I would doubt that there's much overlap at all. And in fact, it's almost as if the one side views the other, not just as the opposition, but as the enemy.
Yeah.
I'll never forget one House Democrat said, they said the Republicans, they're just the opposition. The enemy is the Senate. But I think now many of them see the other party as the enemy.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if they, compromise has become a 4-letter word.
Mm-hmm.
So in the business community, when you want to get things done, you're nonpartisan. You don't care Republican or Democrat. You want to, make improvements and changes, and they have that attitude. It's harder to get things done. You really have to work a little differently than you did, I think, back then.
Do you have any perspective that you could share with us, any insights into how this evolution, has taken place?
Oh boy, I don't know if I'm smart enough to do that. All I can do is tell you what I read. With the I'll call it the balkanization of the news media. You can, if you're conservative, you can only tune into conservative publications and news outlets.
Yeah.
Same thing if you're a liberal, so you never hear the other side. And of course, their interest is in demonizing the other side. So that's what you hear all day long, is you're demonizing the other side. And then you also hear about people, self-selecting where they live, so that Republican districts become more Republican, Democratic districts become more Democratic.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that is reality or what, but they say it used to be that every congressional district that had a Starbucks voted Democrat, and every congressional district that had a Cracker Barrel voted Republican. And now that Starbucks has become so ubiquitous, they changed that to Whole Foods. So if there's a Whole Foods, they vote Democratic. If there's a Cracker Barrel, they vote Republican. It's an interesting comment. Who knows if it's true or not.
Yeah.
By the way, my dog is barking in the background. My son's dog, actually. I don't know what he's barking. He must see a deer or a squirrel in the backyard. So sorry about that if it interrupts the video.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Can't edit it out, but
yeah, adds a little flavor and color.
Human touch. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Do you think privately a lot of the points of view that are held publicly are in fact not embraced by the individuals at this point in time, or has everybody basically, if you're very conservative and if you're publicly very conservative, are you privately willing to work deals?
I think there is a lot of that. When the Klieg lights are turned off, people can become more moderate, but still your votes our public. So while I'm, someone may be an arch conservative and the other person an arch liberal, but privately they get along well and they're friends, they probably have to be careful about letting their constituents see that.
Yeah.
Because that can be, it can be politically deadly for them.
Yeah. So give us a brief sketch of you, the individual who was working during the day and being Dave, father and husband and friend and so forth and so on at nighttime. What is, give us a sketch.
Yeah, I mean, I have 2 kids. I'm married with 2 kids. Both are adults.
Yeah.
J Appliance.
One of each flavor, and both are out of the nest, big boy and big girl jobs. So they're off the payroll. Mostly, I still pay their cell phone bill, but I get it back from them. So because it's cheaper to be on the family plan, which they started when they were in high school.
Right.
In my free time, I'm a dumb jock. I have been my whole life, and now that I have a little more free time, I'm a little more free to indulge in it. I'm also a veteran puzzle doer. Sunday New York Times is my baby. I wait for that, like a farmer waits for the rain, I guess, or what. And so that's me.
And what's the dumb jock? What's the form of expression?
Well, I play now. I play competitive soccer and softball, and I play golf and tennis and pickleball when I can.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, if there's a game going, I'll find it.
So you're probably a fan of at least the not necessarily of the teams he's played for, but Tom Brady, and embracing some of the means of staying in the game for a long period of time.
Yeah, God bless him. 45 years old. He's not 45 yet, but God bless him for being able to hang around that long. And he still seems to have a pretty strong arm.
Have you altered in the last, in order to stay active and be the dumb jock for a long period of time? Have you altered, like anything lifestyle in terms of, are you more active and trying to
Well,
diet?
I mean, because I have more free time, I am more active. When I play golf, I like to walk. I don't always walk, but I prefer to walk if I can.
Sure.
In the summertime, walking 18 holes can be a real challenge.
Yeah.
Walking 9 can be a challenge, but you can do it.
Yep.
And then I, have more time to go to the gym, more time to just generally work out. So that's nice.
Yeah, I have to remind people who will listen to this that you're in Washington. So
that's correct. Washington.
Hot and humid summers make 9 holes.
Are the norm. Hot and humid summers are the norm.
Yeah. So do you have any challenges this year with regard to any of your sports, in terms of, one of the goals that I've set for myself in the next couple of years is to shoot my age from a golf swing?
Well, in golf, it's kind of, in golf specifically, I realized I don't really like to practice. And I know in golf, that's like
Right.
dead. So you kind of have to practice. And so I have no ambition to even enter a tournament, even a club tournament, let alone win one.
Okay.
So my goal is to just not hit crappy, lousy shots. I don't want to hit the ground ball or the shank or the severe slice. So if I'm close to the pin, if I'm on the green, I'm satisfied. I mean, it's nice to try to putt and get a par or even a birdie. But if I don't lose any sleep over it. People, I have friends I play with say, why don't you take, they ask me, why don't I take my time to line up a putt? Why don't I just get up there and hit it? Because I don't really care if I make it. It's in one sense relief because it's liberating.
Yes.
Because I'm not beholden to anything. On the other hand, I do get frustrated, but then I say I don't want to practice. So like if I'd gone out last week in the cold, I would have walked up to the first tee, taken a few practice swings, set myself up, try to remember what I do to hit the ball well, and then pray for the best.
Yeah.
If it goes lousy, I say some bad language and get back and try to do the same thing on the next shot.
Yeah, I'm still having fun with the game. I don't get too serious about score, but I'm trying to, from a mental standpoint, play differently and just end up with a better score.
Yeah.
It's,
When you think about it that way, you really have a different appreciation for the pros because how much mental energy they expend.
yeah,
Thinking about every shot and, should they use a 6-iron on this one or a 5-iron? And, how do they hit their 5-iron versus how do they hit their 6-iron? And what obstacles, where's the bunker? Where's that tree? What kind of lie do they have? And how do they modify their swing to adjust for that, all that?
yeah.
You really appreciate that, those guys who've made it and done well. It's not just a physical talent; it's also a huge mental challenge for them.
Yeah, it's mostly I had for maybe 4 or 5 years I was taking lessons at a country club years ago, and the pro finally said to me, "I can't do anything more for your game. It's all up in your head now."
Really? Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that I was hitting the ball perfectly, but I was hitting the ball well enough so that it wasn't a question of scoring. Was not a question
Right.
whether I was striking the ball well or not.
Right.
It seems like businesses everywhere are experiencing tremendous uncertainty. When you were involved in, and it's been a couple of years now, so it's something that you've seen and dealt with and so forth. Give us your perspective on how businesses are reacting. How did Dover or any of the corporations react under those circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, they all have the same challenges. When you look at what I've learned, even though I was never involved directly, the most important thing for the management to do is figure out where to put their capital investment.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to, in a sense, they're trying to predict the future. So who could have ever thought 3, 4, or 5 years ago that we'd be in the middle of a pandemic now, that people would have worked from home? So maybe you had planned to invest something that would have, taken advantage of the uptick in commercial real estate, commercial occupancy, and all of a sudden 2020, that business would have gone to hell in a handbasket. And that uncertainty, trying to predict the future is, and I think it's even more difficult now because things seem to change a lot faster.
Mm-hmm.
So where you think you were 6 months ago, again, if you were in the middle of, and even now, if you're trying to predict in 3 years from now, what is the state going to be with respect to the pandemic? Are people going to be still working from home the way they are now?
Yeah.
What are traffic patterns going to be like, and how does that affect what you do? And how people are going to buy cars, and who could have predicted the supply chain issues where everybody's having now?
Yep.
How difficult it is to get a hold of anything. No one would have ever predicted that 3 years ago.
Yeah. So what are the challenges that you're taking on? How do you spend your spare time now that you've got a lot of free time?
I'm doing a little bit of consulting still for Dover.
Okay.
And it's I don't know how many hours a week it is. A lot of it's just background stuff. It's not real busy right now, and I'm really careful about how I bill them because I know they went through a huge budget cutting thing, and budgets are tight.
Yes.
So I do a lot of work for them that I don't bill them for. It's because it's background stuff, and if I don't find a nugget in there that's useful to them, I don't charge them for it. But I spent the hour or whatever it was at listening in on a Zoom call or reading some newsletters, things like that. So that's a couple. I mean, this morning that's what I was doing. Spend a lot of time reading the newsletter, see if there's anything that's of relevance to them, and there wasn't. So I won't bill them for it. Other than that, I actually got a very part-time job with the Washington Spirit, which is the women's soccer team here in DC. That's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that, especially being a soccer fan, and appreciate how talented these women are. I don't know why that surprises me, why I say it that way, but I guess I just, seeing the professional game so close makes me wonder what would it be like at the top level, at the World Cup level.
Yes.
And the World Cup level of the men, which is going to be even faster. I see how fast and physical and skilled these women are. And then I think, what about the next level and the next level and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I'd like to do more with them, but, finding something that I can do, and do I want to get paid for it and things like that. So
what are you doing for them?
I'm what they call the referee liaison.
Okay.
Well, that is required by the league, and essentially, I'm a glorified gopher. My job is to take care of any of the off the field stuff the refs need. So it gives them one stop shopping. Any question they have, they don't have to try to find the right person in the organization. They come to me. So, for example, at halftime, one of the refs says to me he has a blister. So I call the medical staff. Can you come over and bring some blister, medicine, whatever it is. One of the refs asked me if I could get some cotton candy for her. We sold cotton candy at the stadium. One of the refs, this game was on television. There was a camera just outside the field, and he thought it was a little close to the pitch. And therefore, could we put some kind of a berm there so in case a player running full speed, doesn't crash into a camera?
Yeah.
I walk out in the field with them if they have any questions about the field. Can we fix this over here? I see and notice there's a divot over there. Are you going, one day they asked, it was a really hot and humid day. Hot day. Sun had been baking the field all day. And they asked if we were going to water it before the game to soften it a little bit. Again, they direct all those to me.
Okay.
And I talk to whoever I need to, the grounds crew, the medical staff, whatever I need to talk to say, hey, the refs want to know if we're going to water the field. The refs want a berm in front of the camera.
That's interesting.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it's required by the league because they don't want the refs to have to run around chasing to find out. One time, I was told this was an interesting one that the news media wanted to talk to the refs before the game. The refs said, "No, we don't talk to the media. That's not what we do."
Yeah.
So when they came up, I was like the guard dog. Well, I found out in talking to them that they were the TV crew and they just wanted to confirm with the refs about commercial timeouts. So when there was a timeout, they would signal when the commercial was over to restart the game. So it was not as nefarious as it was told to me to be. And the refs, of course, were happy to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I talked.
That's what I do.
You and I talked recently about incentives and the opportunity in corporations to get incentives. And you were relaying to me some of your frustrations in terms of the timing of the requests and so forth. Can you relate that?
Yeah, in my experience, companies do not do a very good job of going after incentives. The business people don't think about it that way. They decide they think they need to make a change or want to make a change or they're going to build a new plant or move a plant.
Yep.
And they make the decision to put it in state X. And then they say, okay, now what kind of incentives can we get from the state now that we've made our decision? And as you know, many states have a but-for test that they apply to these things. But for the incentives, the company would not make the decision. And we've already failed that by the time we approach them. And trying to get them to think ahead to say, hey, we're thinking about making it, or we want to make a change, but we haven't made any decisions yet, or we think we want to move it to, and to create a competition. I know just as I was retiring from Dover, we had a situation where the plant was located in one state. We had already made a decision to move it to another, but I got in early enough that I could create the competition between the state where it was, the state they wanted to move it to, and the third one, which was also under consideration, but had been maybe not 100% rejected, but all but. And so we I don't know whatever happened with that one because I left before I saw it to its end, but that's one where we had started to do the right thing.
In order to help corporations with making the best decision from a return on investment standpoint, we're beginning to reach out to the engineers and work with them early on to have incentives be essentially a line item, cost line item that they can embed into their proposals, so that by the time it gets to the business people, the operational people and so forth, there's already a recognition that incentives are something to be actively considered on a go-forward basis.
Yeah, and what I think the business people do is they say it's going to cost us X to make the move, and then the incentives they see as gravy, and they don't realize that if they'd gotten in earlier, they'd have a lot more gravy than they would have otherwise. But they've already made a decision. They've already got part of the approval to spend X to do the move. So what's the big deal?
Yeah, we work on a lot of projects that don't get approved to go forward, and the incentives in many instances are the a difference between getting to an ROI threshold and not getting to an ROI threshold. So it does help to get certain.
Yeah. And I think most companies don't, they present it to the CEO and the board and look for the ROI without incentives. And then they say, oh yeah, we may get incentives too, which will sweeten it, but they have no idea what they'll be.
Sure.
And as you know, once you've made the decision, what you get is the off the shelf, what they offer to everybody. And usually it's a few training grants, things like that, because they're happy to have the jobs and they want to help you train the people, but you've already made your decision. So they're not going to give you the real juicy goodies that they would give you otherwise.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much.
My experience, governors have incentive to do a lot more than the off the shelf.
Yeah. I'm interviewing in about an hour, as a matter of fact, the head of economic development in Arizona. And I'm doing an interview series on the 5 fastest growing states and trying to get an answer from the heads of economic development. Why is that happening in your state? Sort of a softball question, but there's a lot of what I'm finding out is there is a lot of thought that goes into the economic development and business development plans. There's a lot of strategy in the better states. And they in fact are driving a substantial portion of the reasons behind the growth that they're achieving.
Yeah, and you also realize when you get into these things, I'm sure you've seen it, is that the local press is always kind of poking around, saying, are we giving money away unnecessarily? So the political people are always worried about being called to task afterwards for wasting taxpayer money. And as taxpayers, we're happy about that, because we don't want to see money going to a company that ends up, using it frivolously or blowing it or something like that. Yeah. And I know one of the issues we run into in other companies is, we commit to hiring so many people, and we talked about this earlier. Business conditions change, and we struggle hiring those people, and then we get into a pissing match with the state or the local government over the fact that we promised to hire 100 people, we only hired 70.
Most of the incentives, I would say 90 to 95% of the incentives today are based upon performance. So with some exceptions, Pennsylvania has a program where you can get a lot of cash up front, and then you have to perform. And there has to be a clawback provision there, which is the situation you're describing, where people are upset that you didn't create the jobs. But in most instances, if you don't create the jobs, at least from an economic standpoint, the state is not disadvantaged because they're not giving you the incentives up front.
Yeah. But I know the company may build that into their planning. We're going to get X million from the state, and then they don't get it because they didn't hire the people that they said they would.
Yeah, it does certainly affect the ROI on the capital investment, but with the appropriate adjustments to overhead and operating costs and so forth, companies should be real. The ROI will go down, but will not hurt the project that much. It shouldn't, right, unless it's a really substantial cut. Well, Dave, thanks very much for sharing your time today. Appreciate your insights, and best of luck in all of your endeavors, including all of the physical activities that you're involved in.
Thanks, and good luck to you too.
Yeah, I would wish to have all of that time at some point in time. I will, but still pretty active in the business.
Yeah, it is kind of nice.
Thanks again, Dave.
Yep, take care.